Hello, everyone, and welcome to the January 2023 meeting of the Triangle Association of Freelancers. My name is Don Vaughn, and our guest this evening is local science fiction writer A.G. Riddle, who's going to be talking with Nan about his new book, Lost in Time, and his other works, and writing, craft, and everything in between. So I'm going to turn it over, Nan. I'm going to let you start.
All right. Well, I'm going to give a brief introduction right off the back cover of your book. A.G. Riddle spent 10 years starting and running internet companies before retiring to focus on his true passion of writing fiction. He is now an Amazon and Wall Street Journal bestselling author with nearly 5 million copies sold worldwide in 20 languages, and he lives here in North Carolina. So, bouncing off of that, my first question is, since you did start your career in the tech world and always had that passion for writing, what was the spark that made you say, I'm done with the tech world and I'm going to become a full-time writer?
Well, 10 years is a long time to do startups. I mean, we were doing one startup after another, and I was at a point in my career where I felt like I had had some success, but not as much success as I sort of thought I would have in college. And I basically just reflected on, what I thought was going well about my career, what I enjoyed, and what I thought my strengths and limitations were. And I mean, the thing that I came to is that, I loved working on something and building the sites that we were doing, and I loved the creative process, but I didn't really like running a company and all the business stuff, which is the worst possible thing that you can have if you're trying to start, an internet startup or a company. So I was really looking for a career where I could focus more on the creative aspects. And I'd never really had a job or work for anyone. And I had enough money saved up that I could take a little time to figure out what I wanted to do. And science fiction has always been, reading after work is the thing that I look forward to in my life. It's what I enjoyed. And so I thought, I'm going to take a little time to try to write my first novel. And if it takes off, maybe I'll do that as a second career, or maybe I'll do it as a hobby. And the book, The Atlantis Gene, was that novel, and it took me 2.5 years. And so I think for me, I came to writing as sort of a lifestyle endeavor that was really built around what I felt like my strengths were. And I had to learn a lot. But I think it also, I think if you're doing something that plays to your own strengths, you make life a lot easier for yourself. And that's what I found.
And I hear somebody, please make sure you're on mute, folks. We are recording. And that leads nicely into my next question, which is, your initial novels were self-published. And so why did you choose that method over traditional publishing?
Well, it's interesting because, I got into writing because I wanted to do something that wasn't a business, and I wasn't really running a business. And now I've come full circle because my writing business is perhaps larger than any business I've run in terms of the complexity and all this stuff. And, in the last, I self-published the first book because I had learned a lot about writing, but I still knew nothing about the publishing industry. I mean, I've been an avid reader, but I didn't know how that book got to me, or the supply chain, or the querying process, or the agenting process. And so I did understand a great deal about selling things on the internet, and I was technologically pretty savvy. So, I created, the digital edition of the book, the PDF, and did print on demand. I self-published because it was what I was comfortable with. And then I felt like what I really wanted is to get a lot of feedback about the book. My mom read it, and for my mom, it was like, the Bible and then my first book. She was not impartial in any way, and she just thought this was the greatest thing. Like when Anna's my wife, when we would look at our Amazon sales, you could see the geographic distribution of the physical copies that had sold, and most were in Cleveland County, where my mom was. And in the first month, she was buying them. I don't know. I don't even want to think about how much she spent on Amazon or wherever else ordering these copies. But my wife thought the book was pretty good, and I thought I'd done some pretty good work on it. but I think as authors, we're really close to what we've created. I mean, it's hard to get perspective, and either we think it's terrible or we think it's amazing or somewhere in between. And it really, like, if you're going to do this as a career, it becomes, I like to think I write the books that I'm interested in writing and working on, and then I try to publish what I think the world wants to read. And so anyway, I'm self-published because I wanted to get feedback, honest feedback, and figure out if this is something I should be doing. And then I have switched over to traditional publishing in the last year. Well, I should say that in the US is the only place I ever self-published. Abroad, I was always traditionally published in the UK and Australia. And then obviously in foreign languages. We've never endeavored to translate any of the books, but we've sold the rights to foreign publishers. And then I've always been traditionally published in audio. But in the last year or 2 years, the business of self-publishing and all this has gotten a lot more complex, and it's gone in directions that I really don't have any interest in. And so now we've allowed my UK publisher, Bloomsbury, to begin publishing the books in the US, which has been we have a wonderful working relationship with them going back 8-9 years now. So it's been good.
Well, great. And that actually took care of the next question, which was why you had switched to traditional publishing. So we'll move from there. Your original novels, you published as trilogies and duologies. Was that always the plan, or did you find that after you did that initial novel, it just wanted you to continue in that world because you had more to say?
Well, for Atlantis, I had written the sort of the arc of a trilogy, and I thought, if the first book takes off, I'll keep going with this one. And if not, I will maybe go write something else, because I was really trying to get myself established and try to find an audience. I had done, Atlantis is such a complex novel, and it's, 132,000 words with like tons of backstory. So I had to do a lot of planning, and I was really happy that I was able to complete this story. And I think it's good for your career if you can finish out what you start, at least, for reader expectations.
All right. Well, we had talked before we started the meeting that there's been times maybe where you've been approached by Hollywood for possibly optioning your books for a movie. How has that been? Has there been any opportunities or any bites, or how's that been going?
We've had some bites. It's like, we got the line out there and the bobber keeps vibrating and it's gone under the water a few times, but we've never fished anything out. So it might be stuck on a tree or, a rock or something. But, we've had some options and a couple of renewals and some calls and some interest. But, the Hollywood thing, and I think we have the right team. Like, we have the agent that did The Expanse and Bosch and Outlander. But I just don't know. Like, it's something that if it happens, great, but it's just don't know.
Okay. So let's start talking about your current novel. And then we're going to go into a few more questions, and then towards the end, we'll open it up to the audience because I already see people putting stuff in chat. So the current novel out is Lost in Time, which is time travel. And if you could just kind of, for those folks who haven't read it yet, tell us a little bit about what it's about and how this story came to you.
Well, I wanted to write, I guess as I have gotten older, my life has changed. In the beginning, when I wrote The Atlantis Gene, Anne and I were just getting married. We had no kids, and now we have 2 children, and the things I think about are different. The things I fear are different. And so Lost in Time, it was something that I wanted to kind of challenge myself with a different kind of story. I mean, I had always written these stories that were grand in scale with these big, huge threats to human society and civilization. And Lost in Time is a little different in that it's a murder mystery about a widowed father who he and his daughter are framed for this murder. And the murderer, the main character, Sam, is a scientist, a quantum physicist, and he and his daughter are framed for murder. And in order to save her, he admits to the murder. But in the future, criminals aren't sent to prison, they're sent 200 million years into the past. And so Sam is basically separated from his daughter. He goes into the time of the dinosaurs, and his daughter makes it her mission in life to, clear his name and try to get him back. And so it's a different kind of story in that you've got these two characters. And what I really love about it is that, a bit of a spoiler, you figure out that Sam is not actually the hero of the story, it's someone else. And it's a standalone, which I liked writing because I didn't have to do quite as much planning. I mean, obviously, as you read this time travel story, there's a lot of intricate planning, but I don't have to carry it over across book after book after book. And it was good for me to write.
Yes, because you mentioned in your afterword that it had some of your life story in it.
Yes. Well, I mean, I'm just back from the time of the dinosaurs, but
so you haven't actually time traveled, huh? Kind of that dad experience, and I know you mentioned your mom. You lost your mom recently, didn't you?
Yeah, well, about 5 years ago, April marked 5 years, and a lot of the story is about loss. Sam, the widowed father, and then Adeline, who's the daughter, trying to get him back, losing her mother, and revisiting that in the past. I think is some of what drives the story, and sort of them getting over this sort of internal hurt for their family, which I think I think that adds a lot of dimension to it. So it's not, the book is about outrunning dinosaurs and eating wild berries and stuff, but it's really about this family trying to heal and get back together across time.
Well, we're having a lot of questions that pop up that are similar, so I'm going to kind of tie it into where I was heading next. People are asking about your writing process and how you also incorporate still having your family life and a social life into being a full-time writer.
Yeah, it's a good question. My social life is not very active, I have to admit, but the family life is very busy, and we have a lot of help. Anna's parents live very close, and they help us, and we have a nanny who works part-time. And I just, I think if you're going to write, it's sort of like the biggest challenge is the start and stop once you really get into the flow of something, and it can be frustrating. But I think every job has its challenges where you're driving a transfer truck or running a backhoe or a forklift or whatever. I mean, there's things you have to deal with, and that's one. And so I try to write when I feel like I'm at my best, which is the morning, and I try to just carve out time. And this morning I got up at 4 a.m. and did some work before the kids woke up and everyone in the house came alive, and then I took a nap this afternoon. But I think it's sort of figuring out, what are the obstacles, and just saying that is what it is, and let me figure out a plan to work around it. But that's typically what I do is I write in the morning, and then I try to, keep up with the kids and the family as best I can. And I think, my wife is very supportive, and that has been a big help.
So are you a plotter or a pantser? Do you outline everything, or do you kind of do half and half, or do you just kind of go with it?
Well, I'm a bit of both. I mean, when early in my career, I was heavily a plotter, and I needed that plot and the outline really to give me confidence that there was a really strong ending at the end of the book that I was going to be proud of and happy with. Now I would say that, I have my outlines have become less detailed. So I'll do a broad outline, and I do a little more depth on the characters so that I can really get a feel for them. And then I try to have the books be more spontaneous, because of what I've found over the last 10 years of writing is that the books always surprise me. And I love that stuff. I mean, when the characters, you get to know them better, and they evolve, and they become real people, and they do things that you might not expect, or scenes turn out, in ways that you wouldn't expect, but it feels more natural, and it feels like this is where the story should go. So I've become a little more of a pantser, with the idea that if a better idea comes up than the outline, I pursue that idea. And that, and this is why I have to do typically a few drafts to say, okay, this didn't turn out the way I wanted, and because this happened later, this at the beginning doesn't really make sense anymore. So there's some rewrites here, but I guess I'm a mix of both.
Okay. If you had one bit of advice that you could give to someone who is struggling to get published, what would it be?
Well, I think I'm a big believer that you've got to figure out what your strengths are and what you're really interested in. I mean, what you're on fire to write, what you're passionate about, I think is going to come through on the page. And I think if you can sort of find that and go for it, that's going to be the win at your back. I mean, I think there's a lot of people who say write to market and look at what the trends are, but I don't know. I mean, I'm maybe of the school of thought that you can do that, but I think if you can tie the trend in with what you really like and what you're really passionate about, you're going to be helped greatly. I mean, not that you're trying to start a trend, but I think, you know, figuring out what your strengths are, and it may be that your strength is dialogue, or it's plotting, or it's characters, or it's, you know, settings, or whatever it might be. And you can look at the genres and the story types that play to your strengths. You know, a lot of science fiction authors are not really strong dialogue writers. I mean, but if you look at their books, you know, no one's blown away by what these characters are saying, but they are blown away by the technology, or the world building, or the spaceships, or the alien worlds that are, you know, new. And so you don't, I think that my opinion is you don't have to be great at everything. You only have to be good at the things that count, you know, for the story you're writing. And if you can figure out what those are, I think it helps you a great deal.
Okay. Any future projects you're working on that you can tell us about?
I do. Yeah, I have a new book coming out March 2nd called Quantum Radio. And then I've written another novel. I don't know when it will come out, and I may publish it under a pen name because it's a thriller, and it's not really that science fiction. But you know, I write a lot. It's sort of like what I publish is the tip of the iceberg, and so that's all I can talk about.
Okay, we'll have to wait till March then. Well, we have had quite a bit come up in the chat. So Don, I'm going to turn it back over to you to kind of field what we
Sure,
have in
let's
the
see what
chat
else we've
here.
got here. Someone was asking if you use any writing aids such as Scrivener or Plotter, anything like that, Gerry?
I do use Scrivener, and I like it. And then I use a Neo Writer to write my drafts. That's just a digital electronic typewriter.
Can you find them?
No, I just, hold on a second.
All right, let me try.
There we go. I pushed the wrong button.
Okay.
There we go. Yeah, can you see the chat?
Yeah.
There we go. Okay.
Yeah. What trends in self-publishing are you seeing that you don't like?
Well, I do think there's a preoccupation with advertising that I think is maybe crowding out a focus on craft and good books. You know, the idea is that if you can create a book that has a great cover, a great blurb, and is on trend, and heavily advertise it, you don't spend as much time on the story and the characters and creating something great. And I think that hurts the reading and publishing industry, because I think, you know, readers do judge a book by its cover. And if it looks good, it has a good blurb, and, you know, it's heavily advertised, they think, well, it's probably a pretty good book. And then they open it and the reader expectations aren't met. I think that's not great. So I think to me, the challenge in self-publishing is balancing the business side with the craft side, and making sure that we're producing quality books that readers are satisfied with. And I think that goes for traditional publishing too, in terms of creating books that we think are innovative and fresh and original, but also satisfying for, you know, enough readers to keep us all doing what we're doing. So I think that's a bit of a concern. But that's probably always going to be a concern. What other things in self-publishing? I think one of the issues in general is having a healthy ecosystem of retailers that is balanced. And I think, certainly with regard to audiobooks, Audible being, the major player, and then Amazon and ebooks is something we're always kind of thinking about. And there's not a lot we can do as authors, I don't think.
And that's
Gerry,
actually,
I'm sorry, babe, go ahead.
that's a good segue to the next question, which is, as a self-published versus traditional published author, do you go through agents or your publishing house to find your audiobook narrators? Do you get to choose your narrator? This person said that he saw that you had worked with Ray Porter and Eduardo Ballerini.
Yes, Ray Porter I requested for the new book, Quantum Radio. And so Recorded Books, or RB Media, I think is their name now, they release the audiobook, they publish the audiobooks, and they'll send me a list of suggestions and then ask if I have any suggestions. And they're really good at casting. So early in my career, I didn't really have much choice. They were published by Audible, and they told me who was going to be the narrator. And then as my books got more popular, I was able to have more input on the narrator.
Gerry, can you talk a little bit about publishing and translations of your works internationally?
Yeah, I'll have to admit I'm not heavily involved in it. I have an agent in New York who handles, Europe and South America, and then an agent in Taipei who handles Asian foreign rights. And typically, we communicate, here's what the books are to them, and then they'll market them at the Frankfurt Book Fair or the London Book Fair to foreign publishers. And then oftentimes they're bought before the fairs. And I really don't, the only input that I really have is occasionally a publisher will send me a cover for review and approval. And we do receive copies of the foreign editions, which are just thrilling. I mean, just to see them, and it's pretty cool, but I don't just don't have much input in it.
Do you have significant international sales?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually a really good source of revenue. I'll say the translations are the easiest money we make. I mean, literally we get the deposit to the bank account and don't do anything. So, and it's sort of found money because the book is already written. We've done the English version, and if it sells in the Czech Republic for $2,000, it's $2,000 I didn't have. Or if it sells in Slovenia for $500, like it's great. And I think it's cool because some do get really, the books have become really popular in Italy, and whenever I do an announcement on Facebook, here's a new book coming out, instantly on Messenger there's these messages from the Italian readers who speak English. When will this be translated? And I'm like, I don't know. I just work here. I just, so it's cool to see the readers from around the world get in contact. And it's been pretty nice.
Were you an avid reader as a kid?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Who'd
I
you
couldn't
read?
find enough to read. I mean, I love science fiction on TV, but books I loved as well.
Who are your science fiction inspirations?
Well, Dan Simmons' Hyperion remains one of my favorite books. Michael Crichton, I read all of his books as a kid. And then I would just read, Star Trek themed novels that I really enjoyed. And even the classic stuff like Jules Verne and H.G. Wells, I really enjoyed. But yeah, I'd have to get my bookshelf here. I could probably find you a list, but my memory's not as great as it used to be.
Do you read a lot of new? Do you read a lot of new science fiction? Are you, are new authors constantly sending you their work, and so you kind of have a thumb on the pulse of what's going on today?
I guess. I mean, I'm an avid reader, and I do read several different genres. But yeah, I read, within the science fiction that I really enjoy. I mean, I can't find enough to read. So yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions for Gerry?
Somebody asked what you were reading now.
Oh yeah, so I'm reading an advanced review copy of Cory Doctorow's
Oh,
Red Team Blues, which is published by we're the same publisher. But yeah, I'm reading it, and what did I recently read? I think it was a book by Julie Clark. Maybe The Lies I Tell. This is terrible because it was on my Kobo and I saw the cover every night. But yeah, I read every night, and I read Robert Galbraith's The Ink Black Heart, which is the J.K. Rowling's pen name. And I really enjoyed that novel. I mean, it's a really long one, but I thought it was fantastic, and a really interesting look at fandoms. I mean, I don't have a fandom like she has, or like the people in this book had, that was, very, became very toxic. But I thought it was a fascinating book. And I recently read Blake Crouch's new book, Next, or no, was it Upgrade, which I really enjoyed and thought it was great. And,
Speaking of fandom, one of our members was wondering if you had ever written fan fiction.
when I was a kid, I probably wrote some Star Trek stuff, but it's lost to the sands of time, probably. Luckily for me, I'm not sure it would hold up 35 years later.
somebody also asked, they said at one of your signings, you mentioned at that time you were using alpha and beta reading groups. Are you still doing that?
Not right now. With everything we've got going on here at the house, we just feel like we don't have the bandwidth for it. But I know the publisher is Head of Zeus Bloomsbury has been putting the books on NetGalley. So if you're on NetGalley, you can get a copy of Quantum Radio. I think Lost in Time is still up too. But we're doing that, and I would like to get back to the alpha and beta reading. I really enjoyed it personally, but we just didn't feel like we could do it well enough.
And someone also asked, do you get a copy of each of those books that's been translated in other countries for your own library, I guess?
I do, yeah. And there's some behind me. My son comes in here and knocks stuff off, so there might be some missing things, but yeah, they write it in that we get a couple of gratis copies, which is pretty cool.
And I think the last question I had in chat was, what's the most important thing you want your readers to take away from reading your books?
Well, I mean, to me, I love to read a book that leaves me better than I was before. And it could be something that I learned, or some piece of inspiration, or just escaping from life for however many hours. And that's, when I first wrote The Atlantis Gene, I knew that I wouldn't be the greatest, plotter, the greatest writer of dialogue, the greatest character creator, but I knew a lot about genetics and human evolution. And those are things that I thought people might find fascinating. And my hope was that if they read those books, even if they found issue with my craft, that they would come away with a better understanding of these, what I felt were pretty interesting topics. And so I think if you can leave the reader better than they were before, I think that I think is our job as authors.
And that kind of ties into the next question that popped up. What's the best bit of craft advice you've learned in the last 10 years?
Yeah, that's a good one. And I go back to this idea that if you can find what you're really good at and try to get better at that, and to sort of focus, try to align what you're good at with what you want to write and where the market is. And I know that's a tough balancing act, but I do think it's the wind at your back. And the other thing I would say is that you're not going to be great at everything, but you don't have to be. Like if you're not great at dialogue, it's not the end of the world, and it doesn't matter. If you're not great at world building, no problem. You can write thrillers that are just, one action scene after another. And there are lots of people who like to read those. So I think that you get so much writing advice that says you need to do this and this and this. But the truth is, the only thing you have to do is the things that your story requires. And if you choose a story that plays to your strengths, for which there's a market, then I think things are going to turn out okay.
All right. Anyone else have any last questions for Gerry?
Oh,
Some
okay.
people, someone wanted
we-
to know what the best resource would be for buying your books, Gerry. Is there any particular thing that's both good for you and your fans?
I always say, do whatever is best for you. I mean, one of the things we wanted to do with the publisher is to get the books into the public libraries. So if you want to get a copy through the library, either digital or physical, and we wanted to make the books more widely available to local bookstores. So Quail Ridge Books here in Raleigh is a great resource, and they have signed books, and I'm happy to personalize the books from Quail Ridge. But for us, there really isn't any sort of impact either way. So I say, and if you like reading in Kindle Unlimited, that's fine too, or through Kobo or Barnes and Noble Nook. I mean, it's all the same to us. So.
Excellent. And one last question. Rebecca was curious if you feel pressure to maintain the high quality of your books project to project. I mean, how high is the bar for you
Oh,
when
it's
you sit
impressive.
down at the
I mean,
computer?
it's totally great. I was telling my wife, Ann and I were talking about this the other day. I mean, it was almost a little more liberating when I was writing the first novel, because I was like, if this, I'm going to write this under a pen name. If it's a total flop, I'll just go do something else. And now, I still really enjoy writing, but I do feel the pressure to maintain, not only to maintain the quality, but also to maintain the reader expectations, because you build up a brand and you build up expectations that this is the kind of story that I write or publish. And I know a lot of readers read different genres, and they'll read things that aren't like I've published before, but a lot of people automatically buy with certain expectations. And I think it's important for readers and for the publisher to sort of at least deliver on the general premise of the kind of story that I write. But yeah, it's a lot of pressure, but it's part of the job, and it's something you deal with.
Awesome. Okay, Gerry, I can't thank you enough for joining us this evening. This was absolutely wonderful. The information and the insight that you shared with us is exactly what all of us needed. And we're just super happy for your success as a novelist. Love your work, and I hope that we can get together again.
Well, thank you guys for having me. I really enjoyed it, and yeah, good luck with your writing.
Thank you so much. I hope you have a great evening.
All right, you guys too. Take
Take care.
Thanks.